Hi, my name is Kim Mutcherson, co-dean of Rutgers Law School in Camden, and this is The Power of Attorney.
I am very excited to have with me today Jason Berger, one of our graduates who's going to talk to us about his career. So Jason, could you start us off just by telling us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Thanks first and foremost for having me. It's nice to be back.
Excellent.
I certainly appreciate the invitation. Right now, I primarily practice entertainment law. I'm at a firm that's a mid-Atlantic law firm called Margolis Edelstein. I started there. I've been there about 2 years now, and they allowed me to form the entertainment and new media practice group, which I've started, and now we've built some additions and have some lawyers under us, some paralegals, and really have a great team that helps me kind of allow me to do what I do. Aside from my practice, I have a family. We live in Philadelphia. I have some classes that I teach over at Drexel University's music industry program. And, as my career's progressed and things have kind of taken that path, I've really enjoyed what I call the give back. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many young people in our industry, that are so focused at that age. And I'm sure we'll get into it in a little bit. I was the complete opposite.
But that's a perfect segue.
Yeah,
actually.
So to see them focused at that age, I love to be able to contribute to their development. And
right.
And aside from those things, I'm pretty heavily involved in the Recording Academy.
Okay.
And that's kind of part of the give back for me, is doing what I do as a lawyer, and a lot of different things before I jumped into the entertainment fields. Mm-hmm. Gave me some good background to really help with the advocacy efforts. And they're much needed in terms of creators' rights, and how copyright law is a little outdated. We're certainly moving in the right direction with some improvements, but being involved in the academy and being on the board of the Philadelphia chapter and kind of co-chairing the advocacy committee and working down in Washington has been really fulfilling to me. And I think my clients and obviously the creatives really appreciate that. So
I'm gonna take us back.
Sure.
So we can do a little bit of a journey here. So let's start with this. Where are you from originally?
In the Trenton area of New
Okay.
Jersey. I went to high school at Notre Dame High School, right outside in Lawrenceville, New Jersey.
Got it. And when did you decide you wanted to be a lawyer?
About junior year in college.
Oh, so you're kind of a little bit of a late bloomer.
So I guess going way back to, I think it was preschool. I was always argumentative as a child, and I got the F. Lee Bailey Award in preschool. And it was like this running joke in my family of, oh, Jason's always going to be a lawyer. He always had something to say back. And growing up, this was kind of an ongoing joke. I never took it serious. Mm-hmm. I frankly didn't take my academics serious at all.
Okay.
I played sports. That was kind of, what I was interested in as a kid. So when I graduated high school, not really focusing on my academics, my grades were pretty poor. And so I went to community college. And I did well enough there academically, coupled with the activities on the sports side, to get into college in New Jersey.
Got it.
And then it was kind of all in with the sports, and I was doing okay in school. But around junior year in school, I had a very frank conversation with my mother. And she said, what are your plans? And I was living with her at the time. It was just the two of us. And I said, I really don't know. She said, well, let me help you make a decision. You can continue to live here, and I'll continue to pay the bills and the rent and all that, but you're going to stay in school if you want to do that. Otherwise, you should think about what kind of job you want to work on. And I was teaching tennis, so I thought that could be an option. And you can still stay here, but you're going to pay half your share, right? So to me, that was an easy decision because I was not ready to grow up.
Right.
I was not ready to be an adult. And I said, if I'm going to continue education after college, what's the best thing for me? And I thought law school, because I knew a lot of folks who went to law school and enjoyed the process, and not all of them were practicing lawyers. I wasn't convinced at that point I wanted to practice. So I said that's, I think, the most flexible in terms of pursuing a higher education, but having as many options, because I really wasn't set on one role or one industry at that point. Through that process taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my professional career and perhaps my life. I had pretty average grades. I had no letters of recommendation. I was in the one class that had a recovering lawyer, as we call them, right, as a professor. And it was actually the one class in the curriculum at TCNJ that was geared towards people who were not police officers or not correctional officers. Most of the law and justice major, the curriculum, was geared towards those roles. And this gentleman was a great professor, and I just started the class. It was about 2 weeks into it, and I said, hey, would you write me a letter of recommendation? And he laughed at me. And I'm like, what's so funny? And he said, we take that very serious around here, especially for you to want to go to law school and to have the support of myself and the school. Like, this is my first experience with you. You've been in my class a week. Like, we don't do that. My kind of guidepost is I usually will only write letters for students that get A's in my classes. So going back to my nature, my personality, kind of haggled with him and explained to him why I thought I was going to be the best student he's ever had. And he said, listen, I'll make you a deal. If you get an A on the midterm, I'll write you the letter. I put everything into that class. With this class, and when he gave me that deal, I said, I have to see this through. It was maybe like a pre-law or something like that, teach you about the basics of contracts and things like that.
Got it, okay.
And I focused on it, and I studied, and I wound up getting the highest grade in the class for the midterm. And he wrote me the letter, and it was such a valuable experience for me because my whole life doing kind of average in academics, I always thought I was average intelligence, I didn't think that I could do that.
Right.
And I proved to myself a valuable lesson, like, if I put my mind to something, kind of watch out, and that was like my first confidence booster for myself. Took the same path to addressing the LSATs when that was time. I did, okay on that, but I had a difficult time getting into school after, even though I graduated. And from that point on, I really did fine. I think I got straight A's actually from that test on.
Wow.
In undergrad. But because of the cumulative averages, I was still like a C average student, did pretty good, not, through the roof on the LSATs. And I applied to about 12 law schools and got 11 letters saying thanks, but no thanks.
Right.
So I was like, what am I going to do now? I put all this into this goal. And I got an opportunity at Widener University to be involved in a program, a trial admissions program, the summer program. And I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, you want me to pay all this money, commute to Wilmington? I was still living in the Trenton area, so commute to Wilmington 3 nights a week, take classes for 6 hours a night, and take a test against how many other kids, and you're not even telling us how many are going to get admitted? But it was my only option. So I took that same mindset that I did with that midterm, and I was all in. I was able to take out a loan so I didn't have to work that summer, and did it, and ultimately went through that program. Didn't know how beneficial it was to me at the time. It was really kind of difficult, but ultimately out of 116 students, they took 14, and I was fortunate to be one of them.
Wow.
And I didn't realize how much of a blessing it was because the curriculum was virtually identical to the first year curriculum. So now I get into the incoming class, and we have the full class there, and I'm taking the same exact stuff. And they're like first week talking about, oh, here's how you brief a case, and here's how to book brief. And I'm like, been there,
bring on the hard
done
stuff.
that, I always knew, though, that Rutgers was kind of where I wanted to be. I was a New Jersey resident.
Yeah.
At the time, tuition obviously was still an issue.
Yep.
The school's ranking. I knew I kind of wanted to call Philadelphia home base at some point, so that just coming over the bridge on Patco was just all these factors were like, I got to figure out how to get there. And I knew that kind of Widener would be my stepping stone, and I had such a great set-off because of that summer program that I just needed to figure out a way to duplicate that my first year. So I'll chalk a lot of getting over here up to Camille Andrews. She was the only one out of all those rejection letters to say, stay at it. And I had met her in an interview like before just to the judge who I was ultimately wound up clerking for knew her husband, and I came over here for 15 minutes to let her know I was applying. And so even though I got that rejection letter, she called me after and said, just stay on track and do well your first year and keep me in the loop. And if things work out, we'll get you over,
That's
you know?
great.
And she kept that promise. So I think I was in the top 5 or 10% at my first semester at Widener once we got into the first year. And I immediately sent her my grades and, congratulations, Jason. And unless things take a terrible turn, which we don't anticipate, consider yourself in for next year.
That's fantastic.
And that's ultimately how I got here.
That's great.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I like so much about that story is that we have such a range of students and how people get here. But we have a number of students who do community college first and then go, finish out their degree and then end up coming to law school. And actually for the last several years, some of our most successful students, right? We had a period where, I think at least 2 or 3 years where the people who were EICs of Law Review were people who had done exactly what you did, community college, TCNJ. Yeah.
It's not the most traditional path, but I think helped me build a lot of character and a lot of confidence,
Right.
which ultimately then when I got here was like, all right, it's time to kind of kick things into high gear.
Right. So what was the difference between your first year and then when you transferred here to finish it out? What was that transition like?
Pretty seamless.
Mm-hmm.
At that point I had moved to Philadelphia, so I was literally across the river. The commute was very easy. I started focusing on some practical things that I could do in addition to my education, and working with, I had an opportunity that in between summer, first and second year, to work with an organization in Trenton that, I learned some great lessons and met some really cool people.
Mm-hmm.
And that just continued. And I think with the help of the career development department here, which was amazing, I got a lot of those kind of summer and even during the school year internship opportunities that helped kind of steer the path that at least I thought I wanted to be on, including, my initial internship with Judge Vogelson, who was at the Superior Court in Camden. And my first experience there, he ran the civil division, so a lot of volume, and I started to kind of fall in love with the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't so much it was really during my clerkship that being a litigator became my passion.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like the trials per se, it wasn't the nice suits that most of the people wore. It was this one skill that every good lawyer who came in that courtroom had, and it was to be able to convince a guy on the bench who had a robe and legally trained and 30 years experience, and at the same time a jury of their peers,
Right.
to want to rule in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
And they all had like different tools in their toolbox per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to accomplish that.
Right.
But that was the goal that I felt compelled to figure out. And I thought at that point trying cases was the way to accumulate my own toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of figure out how I can get that skill of people, I think, liking me first, and then
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, once it came time, giving them like a legal pathway so they can justify it in their mind to rule in whatever favor I was, advocating for.
Right. So when you were in law school, what were you identifying as your post-law school path? What did you see yourself doing with
Trying
your law degree?
cases.
Yeah.
That was it.
Okay.
Even from my second year, and that only, I think, heightened with my third year here and doing trial advocacy, advanced trial advocacy, pre-trial advocacy. I started to really focus the class selection on what I thought was then, the end game for me, the goal. And to have some of the best lawyers in this area come and teach those classes.
Yeah.
And those lawyers that I would watch and the judge that I clerked for would say, watch him, and to come teach those classes and to learn from some of the best litigators in the area was like fueled the fire for me. It was, amazing.
Did you have any lawyers in your family?
No. I'm the first male in our family to graduate even undergrad.
Wow.
Yeah, my mother was the first of any gender in our family to graduate. She took the same path.
Yeah.
Literally, we went to the same community college. And she then went on to Rutgers and got her nursing degree. And she continued at Rutgers and got her master's in nursing.
That's
and
She sounds like a great person.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
She is. She's my motivation.
Excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about the kind of law that you do. And part of why I want to do that is I think a lot of folks come into law school and they have a vision, right? I'm going to be a health lawyer. I'm going to be an entertainment lawyer. I'm going to do, whatever. And they have absolutely no idea what that actually entails. So can you help people understand, if you say you're a lawyer who does entertainment law, what does that look like?
It really differs, and that's kind of why I love it. At this point, most of my practice is transactional, although I'm sure we'll talk a little bit from kind of leaving my clerkship and pursuing that career as a trial lawyer and then kind of pivoting. But it involves contract negotiations. If I have to go to court, I do, but now that I'm with a firm that has some of the best litigators in the city, I usually tee everything up and get it all nice and then let them, do the arguing in court these days. A lot of time, emails, phone calls, negotiating all kinds of different contracts. I like to go out of my way for most of my clients and try to bring different opportunities to them similar to a manager. And I think that's what sets me apart from a lot of the competition, not just in Philadelphia, but elsewhere. A lot of lawyers are just doing the paperwork and waiting for the deals to come in. And I found that this business is so heavily relationship-based that I really needed to first establish those relationships and then leverage them and take advantage. And it works because I've established with the record labels and the publishing companies and the agencies and the players in this industry, in particular music, to where they love when they see the phone call from me because it's always something that's really quality. And that takes time, At first it was sending them everything and hopefully something stuck and I was able to get my guy a record deal or a publishing agreement. But it becomes easier the more people you know. And as I've developed and my practice has continued to grow, so have those people who started out, some of the most influential people that I now deal with that are really significant positions at major labels. I dealt with them when they were paying my clients parking when I first started. So to see them come up the ropes as kind of my practices increased and that's how relationships, strong ones, I think, are formed. Because you work with each other to help get each other there. And that's been really a special part of what I do now. And being able to achieve some very awesome stuff with a couple text messages or a phone call or meeting up to New York is, I think what adds value to the clients that I work with in addition to the contracts and insurance issues, touring issues. I mean, it's really everything that can come across from a legal perspective or a risk perspective. But to me, it's beyond that. Really enjoyable.
So let's go back again.
Sure.
And talk about that, the space between finishing law school and then you clerked.
Yes. For Judge Vogelson, absolutely.
And then moving from there into a field that was not entertainment law.
At all.
And then ultimately shifting. So what were you doing in between?
Yeah, my clerkship was great, great experiences. In particular, at that time, Judge Vogelson had moved to the General Equity Division in the Chancery Court. So it was very intellectual work. And I started to really appreciate the kind of chess match cases where I had to review all this stuff for the judge, but I would really try to figure it out and try to sit in his shoes. And to me, again, one of those moments that you go back and remember in terms of your development is the one time where it was a very complex case, and I was up almost all night reading things and figuring out my analysis, and I did the memo for the judge, and he came out, the lawyers all came into the courtroom to hear his opinion. This was after a trial. And I did about a 5-page memo to him giving my thoughts on the case and my recommendation. And he almost adopted it verbatim. And I said, that's I'm on the right track. And so he was a great, the biggest thing that I took out of that experience was the relationship with the judge. He became a mentor of mine, a friend, You know, I considered him family. He ultimately married my wife and I. He was very special. And I'll never forget the lessons that he taught me. And leaving there, I knew I had to really rock out to make him proud. And there was a lawyer who had a number of different cases that year in front of him. And every time we left the bench, he said, "Watch that guy. He's special." And he ultimately made a phone call about halfway through my clerkship. And I met and interviewed with the lawyer who managed this firm. It was a mid-size firm in Philadelphia, commercial litigation, so it was right in my wheelhouse with what I wanted to do. And I'll never forget that last interview. We went to lunch when he was, I assumed, was going to offer me the job. And I said something to him along the lines of, you know, I'm all in on this, and I will stay here. I plan to become a partner here, and hopefully I'll continue the firm after. You know, he said, you know, I've been really impressed with you so far, but I have to let you know how naive that statement is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute. I had bought a new suit that day.
Right.
I had got a fresh haircut. Like, I was like, waiting for my first offer as a lawyer, right? And I just pour everything out to this guy, and in return, he's like, "You're naive." I felt some type of way about it at the time. In hindsight, he couldn't have been more right.
Absolutely.
But I held at least a good portion of my end of the bargain. I jumped right in. I took on as much responsibility as I could, as much as they would give me, frankly. So I was managing cases from start to finish, the client relationships. I tried my first case my first year off the clerkship. It was, you know, municipal court, but still, it was I got to go home and call my mom.
Absolutely.
And that just continued. And the kinds of cases and the kinds of clients, and I started to get kind of good at it, you know, to the point where I was about 6 or 7 years out and with the firm, and I probably would have been on the partnership track either that year or the next. You know, litigation is a lot of investment, hours, emotional, right? A lot of time, I thought I had to become an expert on whatever it was that I was trying, so that any question a judge asked me, I had the answer, you know, and I took that very seriously. Towards the end of that time period, I wasn't fulfilled anymore with the end of the day result, because we did a lot of things on the defensive side where it wasn't insurance coverage stuff, you know, and it was becoming a too frequent of an occurrence that I would do everything I was trained to do, going up and winning cases, even trials, and still to a certain extent having a disappointed client, you know? And I was never that type where I needed a pat on the back, per se. Every once in a while to hear, "Hey, good job, Jason," is cool.
Yeah.
But that wasn't it. For me, it was within myself and not feeling fulfilled with that process, because I pour my heart and soul into it. I, you know, study this stuff like it's going out of style, and I do everything I was trained to do and taught to do, and I still have someone who's upset at the end of the day. That I didn't think that I could continue that path for another 20, 30, 40, however long I'm going to be doing this. I didn't think I could pour that much into that role and ride the train home with this cloud over my head at night. And that was coming, like, it may have been once a month before, and then it felt like it was 2 weeks, and then it was every week, and then it was every case, and I was like, I got to figure out something that I can be passionate about, and it doesn't feel like this, you know? And I don't even remember who I spoke with, but it was somebody who did something completely different industry, non-lawyer, and they said, "You'll find it, and it won't feel like work. And you enjoy it so much that the fact that you're getting paid to do it is like crazy to you, because you can't imagine enjoying doing something and spending time on something, and at the same time being able to pay your bills and support your family with it." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Work is work." Like, you know, even though I enjoyed a lot of that 6 or 7 year period, and especially some of the wins was amazing, you know, but it was still work. So I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, love what you do all day, like every day?" And that kind of stuck in my mind. And I said, well, why don't I try to switch gears a little bit and find that? I don't know if I can, but at least it's worth a shot, you know. I'd always been somewhat passionate about music, even if it was just the soundtrack to certain things that you remember and go back to.
Right.
And I thought it was amazing that some of my friends that I had at the time were pursuing it as a living. And I said, well, I don't want to stop being a lawyer. I put so much into this process of going to law school and really learning the law and learning how to learn. That's another thing that I learned here. But I said, I still want to be a lawyer. I like the analysis. I like helping people. I like, the core components of the job description, if you will. I just needed to find a substance that I could feel passionate about, like this gentleman was talking about. And for me, that was music. So I told the managing partner at the time that I kind of wanted to switch gears, and he was supportive to the extent he could be with the kind of firm it was. So I started working on more transactional cases. It still substantively was the stuff they did, but at least I was learning more about sophisticated contracts. I was learning more about the negotiation process and doing deals, things that are more, relevant in what I do now. So he was supportive to the extent he could be. And at some point I went in and I said, I don't think I could ever do what I want to do while I'm here. It's just too oil and water,
right?
So I thanked him for everything, and I still do when I speak to him. He's still a great mentor and a friend of mine. And I found a firm that I thought was dedicated to building an entertainment group, and there was a lawyer there at the time who had done entertainment work, so I figured I'd come kind of learn some of the ropes under him, and it was helpful for sure. But it was tough because that lawyer had left pretty quickly after I got there. And that kind of grooming process never happened. So I learned it myself. I literally went, there was still the Borders on 18th and Rittenhouse, right? And I went there every month and checked any new books. And I found some books and I found some resources online. And I read everything there was, because here, again, when I'm learning how to be a lawyer, I'm taking the classes that a litigator would take. I wasn't taking copyrights. I wasn't taking trademarks,
Right.
So this being such prevalent issues in what I do in entertainment law and music in particular, I had to learn it. So I did. And I was up, every night like I was preparing for those cases. Now I was just reading. And so I kind of taught myself the bigger issues. And I volunteered for some pro bono work with the Arts and Business Council in Philadelphia. So I was able to cut my teeth on some things where it wasn't about $1 million. It may only be about, $100. But for me, that was half the challenge, because I was already pretty entrenched in the Philadelphia area. I had, met the woman who was going to be my wife now, who is my wife now. I had a lot of connections in the area, albeit not so much entertainment related, and I really like it on top of that. So I also knew that the more traditional jobs for entertainment lawyers were not in Philadelphia. There's a handful of lawyers who do well, but they mostly do well because they've built a practice. So I knew that if I wanted to practice this area of the law and stay in Philadelphia, I would need to build skills to build a book the same way I learned copyright and the same way I learned music contracts and, some television and film stuff. And that was quite a process. I first called each one of those people who I'm proud to say are still colleagues, and, great little ecosystem we have over there. But I invited them to lunch anywhere they wanted in town just to pick their brain for an hour, and mostly asked them questions about how they got a practice, how they found their clients. And they were all pretty receptive, and it was, really appreciated. So took some of that, and I took some of what this person told me, and I took some of what that person told me, and I figured out kind of my plan. And that plan for about 3 years was to stay out. I was out 6 nights a week, at least.
Okay.
And it was some rooms were business folks, some rooms were the TLA. And
not everybody who's listening to this is going to know what TLA is.
So the Theater of the Living Arts is a very historic music venue on South Street in Philadelphia. And I grew up listening to hip-hop and R&B. So when I went out and I didn't have anything else to do, if there wasn't a panel somewhere or an industry meeting or something like that, I'd go to a show and figure if I could shake one or two hands out of all the people in this room, I've accomplished something. It was about probably 3 years into that process, and I was still at that firm, about half entertainment and half litigation to kind of earn my salary. Mm-hmm. It was one of those nights I was by myself. I couldn't convince any of my buddies to come with me. It was like some terrible band at one of these venues. But I was up against the corner, and I was enjoying myself. And it clicked. I found what that guy was telling me. And it was just getting started, so it was probably a little premature for me to be like, I found it, you know? I was just there as a fan of music, as a guy who enjoyed going out on a Thursday night and having a beer or two. Mm-hmm. And it clicked to me that indirectly this was work. And I was there to still shake hands, and I would meet some people and gather these relationships that have become so important. That's kind of when I kicked it into high gear, because I really felt that passion. And it was no longer learning work. This is what I wanted. Right. And I need it. And I was like hungry for it, you know. And that's continued. I still operate that way. Now I don't go out 6 nights a week.
Right.
I've learned to hustle smarter as opposed to harder. Mm-hmm. And rather than go into a venue or a room where I would just try to shake everybody's hand and hand out cards and hopefully one of those worked, now I go into the rooms where I know there's 5 people who I need to leave with their info. And it's probably an hour process versus, you know, being out all night.
Right.
And that comes only with experience.
Yeah.
And relationships building and all those things.
So the next piece of the puzzle that I was going to ask you about is kind of thinking about talking to your younger self, right? You know, what are some of the things that you have learned over the years that you maybe wish you had learned earlier, and that you would want to convey to somebody in your shoes in the past?
I think one is going back to such a valuable lesson that I learned here. And if there is a way for people before they get to this level of education to learn how to learn. Mm-hmm. I never realized until I came here that there's a process to learning. Mm-hmm. And it's not just flashcard memorization stuff that we've learned from kindergarten through even college. Right. You know? And to me, that was amazing, because as I was building confidence with some of these lessons and some of these experiences, once I realized that I had been taught through the courses here and even some special, some of the teachers, the professors here that took a greater interest in office hour meetings or lunches and learned the process of learning. And then you really couldn't tell me much, because it was like, as long as I'm willing to invest the time, I figured out at that point that as long as I was willing to contribute whatever those factors were, I was going to achieve whatever I put my mind to. Mm-hmm. And that was such a big lesson to learn at an age when I was, 22 or 23 and about to embark on a career, and now in particular in an industry that is tough. Yeah. It's different. It's difficult. And there's a lot of competition, all kinds of factors. But again, such a valuable lesson to understand the process of learning, not just memorizing information and spitting it back out. That's one thing that I would implore anybody who's focused on their education, regardless of what stage, to really try to hone in on that and figure that process out. I think it's different for everybody, but for me it clicked then. And I think the other piece of advice that I would give is just remain open-minded. There's so many factors that are out of your control that can take your life in one direction or the next, good and bad. And to not be hung up on this one path, roll with it and do your best. And whatever you put your mind to, put 110% into, and things are going to work out for you, Mm-hmm. And even the negative experiences or the bad experiences, again, even when I graduated here, I didn't know that I appreciated what to take from those. It was just a step backwards. But a step backwards, some of those steps backwards, some of those no's that I've received over the years have become the biggest lessons and then turned into the biggest motivations also. Right. You figure out a way to deal with those no's and if you can learn from it and become a better person and employ that in your professional life, I think that's one that I'd love to be able to tell myself at 18. Yeah. Don't sweat the small stuff.
It sounds a little bit like there have been some benefits to you of being more of a kind of big fish in a small pond, as opposed to being where, you know, the sort of core of the entertainment industry is.
Sure.
So one, whether, am I right to think that there might be some truth to that? And two, in what ways is that true?
Yeah, absolutely true. Again, when I started doing it, never thought of that. It was just what I called home. And there was enough from what I saw that I could get a few clients and maybe make some money doing this. That was what I set out to do, you know. The process took a long time, and it was those handshakes. So for me, Philadelphia has always been a very creative town, right? And we used to have the business infrastructure to support that talent. And while the infrastructure comes and goes, and a lot of it is gone and moved to New York and LA and Nashville and other cities that are trending that way, the talent has never left. And that's in the roots, that's in the water, whatever you want to call it. That flow of talent will always be here. And for me, that was very important, because I always thought of myself of helping the talent versus going to work for one client like a record company. And I became really passionate about that. So I then set out these relationships and form these relationships so that I would get that talent come through my office at a very early stage. And if I was in New York or LA, I wouldn't have that unless I was doing it maybe forever or struck gold with a client. These artists break, a lawyer could break like that too with the right client. But I wanted to build something sustainable. So I established this web of networks with managers and venues and people that in my neighborhood. And really got the best of the best at an early stage. And as my reputation grew and that increased. So to answer the question in a long-winded way, I will never give up what I now enjoy in Philadelphia and the market, and kind of being that guy or one of the few because of that deal flow and because of my passion to help the artist first and foremost. It's difficult because I have to maintain a presence in those other towns to be effective, because you still need those buildings.
Sure.
I still need the labels to make my clients happy. I still need the publishers and the talent agents. And so I do a lot of traveling. I maintain those relationships with, you know, if I have a meeting in New York, I'll spend 2 days in New York, and I'll go to lunch with the people that I have to keep that. So I maintain a presence there at some point, and who knows, maybe at some point I'll spend more of my actual time in those places, as long as I can continue to maintain the deal flow from Philadelphia, if you will, and obviously the South Jersey and surrounding areas. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
All right, so my last question, and you can pick which piece of this you want to respond to. Favorite artist, favorite song, or favorite concert you've been to?
Why don't I do one that's not a client, although that's ultimately the late nights at the office, the, you know, going home, having dinner, putting the baby to bed, and back in the office it's my client's music that keeps me motivated. So, you know, I'm now to a point where almost all the music, the new clients that I take on, I'm really passionate about it, and I enjoy listening to it even more than mainstream radio or satellite. But in terms of like mainstream artists, I think right now at least, big fan of Anderson .Paak. He's an artist from California, progressing through. He's on his second tour through Philadelphia at the end of May at the Met, and just a great artist. He's a percussionist, he's a drummer, but he's a vocalist. His voice is great. It's been some really cool shows. I've seen him probably 5 or 6 times, and he'll do part of the show just with the mic, and then he'll get on the drum kit, and he'll actually drum and sing. And there's a certain vibe to his music that, I don't know, just resonates with me.
Okay.
So I think right now I'm listening to a lot of him, but that answer for me changes probably monthly, if not more frequently.
Yeah.
The second,
favorite concert?
I think it was some of the festival stages where there's big crowds, but it's my clients who are on stage, you know? And there's been a few. I work with an artist who's become one of my best friends, a guy named Chilled Moody from Philadelphia. And I've worked with him pretty much since I started doing this. So it was, again, it's nice to see his career develop as mine have, and I think that's why we admire each other so much and get along so well. But like the first couple times that he got some big shows and I saw the crowd react, and it's 5,000-6,000 people, and people are singing the words, and it's just like special.
Yeah.
There's also been some that's like, I was pretty blown away at Jay-Z and Beyonce's show last summer at Lincoln Financial Field, just because of the production.
Yeah, absolutely,
you know?
yeah.
I think, again, I know I'm answering giving
No,
you
that's
multiple
fine.
answers. One, in fact, 2 shows last year were very special because Chill and I and the rest of our team organized our own festival. So we partnered with RLAW'0 Welcome America around July 4th.
Right.
They always have that big stage on the Parkway
Yep.
with the fireworks, and the Philly Pops have been recent. And last year we got them to give us our own stage. So we put on our own festival last year.
Excellent.
We booked the talent, we brought in the vendors, we figured out the partnerships necessary to make it happen and raise the money. It was a lot. We didn't realize what we got ourselves into, and we had to pull it off in such a short period of time. And it pretty much went off without a hitch. So because of that, we're back down there again. This July 4th, we've expanded the Chill Moody experience into a 2-day event now where on July 3rd, we're going to be focusing on all-female visual artists as well as all-female recording artists.
Awesome.
In a very special full-day event. The details will be coming out publicly soon. And again, we're going to do the stage on the 4th. Within the compound, we have, the same kind of situation, primarily Philly acts, but because we had a little more planning and a little more resources this year, we'll expand to some bigger acts to bring some more fans down there. And we did another one in September last year with a lot more planning time. And again, that was at Spruce Street Harbor Park, but an all-day, all-day stage. And that was really, we handpicked like our favorite artists that you probably haven't heard of, but are all tremendously talented. So special on a home team level.
Yep.
And it made me realize how none of that involves the practice of law, right? Other than maybe doing the artist contracts and dealing with the insurance policies and the venues and like some of it. So I don't know, the more I do what I do, the more I really enjoy some of those projects where it's really not law-based, but utilizing the resources that I've been able to accumulate through my practice and then do other things that, we talk about enjoyable. Like I had this grin on all day, both of those days, once I realized everything was good, it was going to be successful. So
Thank you so much. This was a really lovely conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for coming back to the building. It's good to have you.
The Power of Attorney is produced by Rutgers Law School. With 2 locations, minutes from Philadelphia and New York City, Rutgers Law offers the prestige and reputation of a large, nationally known university with a personal, small campus experience. Learn more by visiting law.rutgers.edu.